ICP. What is it? Is it insane clown posse?
It's not insane clown posse. No. ICP, ideal client profile. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So ICP. Here's to begin. My first thought on that is the way I operated was everybody was my customer, right? And if everybody is your customer, almost nobody's your customer. That's what we've learned over time. When you're thinking about the person that you want to service, the more granular you can get, the more effective you can be. And in real estate, that's generally going to start with trying to carve out an area that you become a master in, not the entire city and all of the outlying suburbs, because it's just too diluted, right? So at a minimum, start with the neighborhood you live in and create a radius around that. And start to maybe, work that area. If you want it to be more scientific about it, I see a lot of people, they're like, oh, my criteria is $1 million buyers, right? There's just not enough in a lot of markets. And so they try to go real high, top of the market, and then they alienate all of their peers because they're like, oh, I didn't want to list my $300,000 house with you because I thought you only mess with luxury, right? So if you look at what happens in your marketplace, you're going to have a thick chunk of price ranges that have the most volume of transactions. That's a great place to start. Yeah.
Yes. And start does not mean you have to end there either.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I've seen some teams and stuff have like a luxury division of their team.
Yeah.
Which is a cool way to kind of segment it to where you can target that group of people. But I love the idea of just using an area as your target,
right,
and being as tight knit as possible. I was watching somebody talk the other day as one of our clients, and they were like, I'm in this state and I go as high as that border and as far as this. And he was talking about like 100+ mile radius
in residential real estate.
In residential.
Yep.
I was like, oh my God, I want to help him. Right.
Yeah.
Because like just being able to target in. And this helps majorly with the marketing and stuff that you're doing and some of the things that you're
100%.
saying.
Not just that, like if you have listings in a specific radius and you concentrated, you basically own that area. Every time they drive past somebody's house, it's a stronger chance of seeing your property, your brand, your for sale sign. I'll never forget the first time I started to gather an understanding about this. I had a guy that wanted me to show a property way up north, right? And I said, I'm so sorry I don't service that area, but I can find you an agent that does. And like, I just felt like a weight come off me because it was like a 45-minute drive. Right. Most of the properties out there were lower priced. And, it was a little sketch, right? Like I didn't want to go out there anyway if I ended up in a dueling banjo situation. The road just the path stops, and now you can't leave, right? But yeah, so that was really helpful. And what I started to do was I started to just work my neighborhood. I had moved to a neighborhood that I wanted to be in that was a higher end neighborhood, and I started to check out every listing that went for sale there. Builders, meet with them, talk with them, before they put it on the market. It's just another benefit. Hey, I'll be able to show your home easier and faster than anybody else because I just live right down the street, right? Plus, I have a vested interest in this neighborhood. The higher their average comp, the higher my home's worth, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just another way to position that.
Yeah. So how do you feel about like agents who take a specialty, like really going after or military or like specific types of purchases?
If you live in a town where you have like a army base or something, that might be productive. But I think anything outside of that is going to be a mistake, right? Like an example would be at the lake, we had one team that just serviced condos, but they didn't just service condos, right? Like that was their marketing, the condo specialists, right? But when you draw a line in the sand, it has to be legit, it has to be real, and there's no reason to artificially alienate other people. I think situationally, yeah, if you live in a military town, cool. Other than that, it's just spinning your wheels.
And one thing I've seen that has worked for people is not necessarily like targeting in to where you are alienating something, like and calling out. On the way to Branson, there's a condo king, caricature type drawing of a person, which is cool. Like there's probably enough in Branson to where you could try and actually focus on that. But what I have seen is like having more of yourself in your marketing and how you are, right? So at the lake, guessing it wasn't suited and booted with cufflinks and stuff, because most people you have showing up are wearing flip-flops to go look at a house.
100%. Polos, some shorts.
Right.
Yeah.
Some Sperry's. Boat shoes.
Of course.
Right. And it's just like,
Actually, never had those for the record, but I'd like some.
so if we have that, like you can start kind of creating your own little thing that's going to attract the people you want to work with. So I had this guy, a fellow stand-up comedian, but he was doing real estate in Chicago, and I was talking to him about branding years and years ago, and he was like, I'm really wanting to take a swing and like put out some funny stuff in my marketing and in some of the branding stuff. I want to kind of make it lighthearted, but I also don't want to, scare away people that are a little bit more
He
serious.
sounds like a hack.
I think he was. But a lot of his ideas were like really comical. And I was like, well, especially in an area like Chicago, where you've got so many different transactions that you can go,
Right.
You could do that where you're going to attract more of the people that are like, that you will have an actual good time like going out and show properties to.
Yeah.
Right. And dealing with.
Well, the first time I learned about this concept from a marketing perspective was you want to have the ads that you have represent the people that you're trying to target. Right. And so, like, for example, if it were military, right, you'd want to have some aspect of that. Or if you predominantly focused on areas where, the hospital was important, you'd want to have, doctors, nurses, things of that nature in your marketing itself. So people would be like, oh, that's me, that's for me. So I think ICP is something that's super underrated that most agents don't take the time to think through and understand. Because it's not really talked about a lot, But at a minimum, just beginning with the area that is going to give you the most advantage as far as transactions is concerned. And if you're in a lower transaction area or lower average dollar amount, that's another thing you could do to move the needle. Start to focus on one that's a higher average dollar amount. When I was in Sunrise Beach, it was a lower average. When I opened up an office in Lake Ozark, it was higher. And what I learned from that is, when people would come and they would start to shop real estate in Lake Ozark versus in Sunrise Beach, their market awareness that they got as far as how far their money would stretch was wildly different, right? So they might, I think back then it was like 250 in Sunrise Beach was the average and like 4 something in Lake Ozark. And when you'd go out and you look at something for 250, it'd be absolute garbage, right? So they'd have to spend around that 400 mark. So you're showing them properties. That's how they're getting their market awareness. And that's why it's such an easier game to play if you're purposeful about who it is you're going to service and what area you're going to attack.
Okay. I just real quick, I have to make a mention of this. I hate the fact that there's a town called Lake Ozark.
Why?
Because Lake of the Ozarks, and then you have Ozark, which is not close to Lake of the Ozarks. And it was always so confusing to me, like when we first got together or whatever.
Yeah.
And there was, I was looking up addresses and stuff. I was like, Lake of the Ozark, and then it was Ozark because you lived in Ozark. And I was like, I am so confused.
Yeah, I literally went from Lake Ozark to Ozark, Missouri. Yeah, when I moved.
Crazy.
So I just had to scrape one word off the back of my boat,
It's like I'm not changing a whole lot of address around here.
Right? Yeah.
That was part of your protocol for where to live.
Yeah, it'd be easier. But the funny thing is, like, Ozark, Missouri is not in any way, like, people don't think of it as something separate. They just think of Lake of the Ozarks, which is good for Lake of the Ozarks, I guess.
I think the show Ozark was put it on the map.
100%.
I don't think even before that, other than this area, ever thought about it.
No.
And speaking of branding, Lake of the Ozark type style, we had an agent come in here that had came on board recently, and they had this idea of going like lifestyle with their marketing and approach.
Yeah.
So their plan, which I love, was to start for people that are coming into Lake of the Ozarks for second home vacation houses to have like whole weekends about it and being like water front properties, going and visiting by boat. So having them out on the boat, having a whole experience for a day, going to look at houses and stuff.
I definitely have to have a buyer's agency for that.
Yes.
Like, there's no way I'm taking you out on the boat. Like, oh, you might be cool, but yeah.
But they were like, we're going to be on the boat anyway all weekend, so might as well make some money while we're doing it. And I was telling them about somebody had done it in Prosper where they were doing it for California people and doing a whole experience thing.
Yeah.
But it's just
We'll
so many
link the
things.
video right here.
Yeah, there we go. But there's so many of those things where it's like I feel like people don't take swings. Like there's getting really clear on what it is, and at the beginning, like if you are very much at the beginning, and it's like I would literally take anybody to go look at any property right now. Start in that just area side, ICP, and then as you start expanding out your business and you can get to the point where like that is too far north,
Right.
I'll refer you to somebody else. Like that's such a good place to be. It's like talking to like every top agent that I know.
Yeah.
It's like usually the most liberating time in someone's life.
It's a game changer.
when
Let me
you
tell you.
pass up
Yeah.
10 grand commission, 20 grand commission just because it's not worth it.
Right.
You know? It's a
Yeah.
good
The
place
worst
to be.
advice I got on that was from a really smart banker. He owned the bank, and he's like, "Let me tell you something. You take all the change off the table. You never refuse a deal." And I was like, "Okay." And so that's what I did until I didn't, and it paid a lot more to not. Right. But you got to have some things in place for that to be
Correct.
even a possibility. You have to have, a consistent lead flow to where you can sift and sort and raise the bar of who you're going to work with. Anything outside of that, you're always going to be at the mercy of, I need a deal now, and I got to deal with whoever comes in, which, is a problem, right? Like you get people that you don't want to deal with. But from an ICP standpoint, in the beginning, at a minimum, saying, okay, I'm going to carve out this area, even if it's not where you live. This is where I would like to live. So I'm going to dive deep and understand in that market or that neighborhood or those 4 subdivisions, right? Everything that comes on the market, you're going to check out, right? So that you can walk in there, you look to see what it's sold for, so you get an understanding of what actually market awareness is in that area, and you'll get high level of expertise quickly through that process. And when you're taking a listing, you'll be like, well, I was in the past 12 homes that sold, right? In the past 6 months, I know exactly what yours is going to sell for. It makes you become an expert, knowing how many homes are for sale, what the absorption rate is, right? It takes this big thing of an entire area or city or market, and it just squeezes it down to something that's actually bite-sized that you can digest and again become an expert in. And I think that the agents that do this, they have such an advantage because nobody else ever does. I remember the first time I started going into that luxury neighborhood, there was another agent there who had kind of dominated. And I remember I had called her about a particular property, and I could hear the shock in her voice. It was like an oh shit moment. Like somebody else isn't afraid to like come in here and do this in this area that I thought I had on lock, right? And it was a little upper end, so that's intimidating sometimes. But I didn't care, right? Like I was coming in, and it worked, and it was wonderful.
Here's my crowbar.
100%.
I'm going to make it happen.
If you're looking to get referrals consistently every single month in exchange for a referral fee, click the link below.